It's on the porch now. It's not. It isn't shadow. Shadow doesn't have weight. It doesn't make the boards. I left one light on. I left one light on. I just need it to be enough. Come on in now. Sit down where you are. Pull whatever covers you have up a little closer to your chin and let the room settle around you. You don't need to go anywhere tonight. You don't need to do a single thing except listen and breathe and let my voice carry you down into that long, quiet dark where the dreaming lives. My name doesn't matter much. People around here, the ones who still come to me, they call me the Archivist. I keep records. I write down what happened in the hollows and on the ridges and along the creek beds where the county maps go thin and the road signs get swallowed by kudzu. I write it all down so that somebody, someday, might understand what this land asks of the people who live on it. Tonight, I want to tell you about a man named Elias. The file I have on him is labeled Case File 092. The county designation, before the county stopped keeping records of the affected area altogether, was Lux-Hollow. A funny name for a place that became famous for its darkness. But that's what this land does. It names things true before you understand why. Elias came to Lux-Hollow in the early part of October. The year doesn't matter. The season matters. The season always matters in the mountains. He had driven up from a city, one of those cities full of right angles and scheduled light, where the darkness is never allowed to settle properly, where the sky at night is a kind of bruised orange, and the stars are theoretical things you read about but rarely see. He had lived 41 years in that city, and he had grown tired of it in the way that people do. Not all at once, but slowly, the way a river carves a valley. One morning he woke up and the tiredness had simply become the shape of him. So he found the listing for a cabin on a ridge in a county he'd never heard of, in the part of the state where the mountains fold into themselves like sleeping animals. And he signed the papers, and he came. The cabin was old in the particular way that Appalachian structures are old. Not crumbling, not romantic, but dense. Dense with time. The logs had gone the color of iron, and the chinking between them had been repaired so many times it looked like a map of surgeries. The porch wrapped around 3 sides, and the boards were the color of old bone. The air up there, I want you to hold this now. The air up there smelled like damp pine resin and ozone and the faint mineral tang of cold creek water, even though the nearest creek was a quarter-mile downhill. The cold came off the mountain above the cabin in slow, rolling waves, even in October, even before the first real frost, and it carried that smell with it like a gift, like a warning, like both. Elias breathed it in, standing in the gravel drive with his truck running and his hands in his coat pockets. And he thought this was the right choice. He was correct about that. He just didn't understand what the right choice would cost him. The first thing he really noticed, in the way that the body notices before the mind catches up, was the lights. Every other structure visible from his ridge was lit. Not warmly lit, not porch lamp lit, the way you might expect from mountain homes in the quiet hours. These lights were institutional. The nearest neighbor, a farmhouse perhaps 3/4 of a mile down the eastern slope, was ringed in floodlights the color of daylight, tall industrial poles staked into the earth around the property's perimeter, burning white and absolute. Another house, further south, barely visible through the tree line, pulsed with a steady amber glow from what appeared to be sodium vapor lamps, old ones, the kind that hum at a frequency you feel in your back teeth. There was a farmstead to the northwest. Elias could see the silhouette of it on the next ridge over, and it burned so many lights that on overcast nights, he would later write in his journal, the cloud cover above it had a faint, persistent blush, as if the farm were a small and determined city. He thought it was strange. He thought perhaps these were people afraid of coyotes, or of the particular paranoia that isolation breeds in certain temperaments. He did not think about it again for nearly 3 weeks. Now, before I tell you what happened on the night Elias made his error, I need to lay some older stone. The people who settled these specific ridges, not the county broadly, but these ridges, the ones that feed into Lux-Hollow proper, came through the Cumberland Gap in the late 1700s, and they brought with them a knowledge that was neither fully superstition nor fully science, but the useful territory in between. They knew plants and roots. They knew the behavior of water, and they knew, or rather they had learned through terrible education over 2 or 3 generations, something particular about the nature of darkness in this elevation. The earliest journals, the ones I keep in the archive, are written in a cramped Scots-Irish hand, and they refer to the darkness of the hollow not as an absence of light, but as a presence, a substance. They called it the weight, or in a few cases that I find particularly striking, the glass dark, because because of the way it moved. Not like shadow, which simply is wherever light is not, but like a very slow, very cold liquid, seeking low places, pooling against solid objects, pressing. They kept tallow candles burning on every sill, every window, every night from first dark until full dawn. Not for comfort, not for fear of the human kind of threat. They kept those candles burning the way you keep a levee intact. Not because you're afraid of the water tonight, but because you understand what water, given time and opportunity, will do. When the tallow ran thin, they rendered bone fat. When bone fat was scarce, they burned pine knot torches and propped them against the outside walls. One journal entry, this one from a woman named Merritt, whose last name the record doesn't preserve, reads simply, "Let the light bill come due. Better we pay it than let the dark take its own interest." I have thought about that phrase for a long time. The Porch-Light tax. The cost of living on this land is light. Not warmth, not noise, not salt at the threshold or iron above the door, the way other traditions handle other threats. Just light. Constant, unbroken, patient light. The settlers understood this. Their children understood it. Their children's children, who wired up the first electric lights in the 1930s and replaced their sodium lamps in fluorescence with something more reliable and more bright. They understood it too. It passed down, not as a story, but as a habit. The way you lock a door without thinking about why, because the body remembers, even when the mind has moved on. Elias had no body memory of this place. He had arrived from elsewhere, carrying elsewhere's habits. And on the 19th night of October, he flipped the breaker that killed the floodlights. He had been wanting to see the stars. That is the whole of it. There is no grander reason. He had driven 4 hours into the mountains, partly for the sky. And every night since his arrival, the floodlights on their bracket above the porch eave had washed the whole ridge in a flat industrial white that turned the sky a ceiling gray and swallowed every star above 15 degrees of elevation. He had called the power company twice about the bill. The lights were old. The previous tenant had installed them, or perhaps the one before, and they drew more current than he'd expected. So on the 19th night, after a dinner of canned soup and crackling radio, he went to the breaker box in the utility closet, and he flipped the switch. The floodlights went out. He stepped onto the porch, and the sky was extraordinary. That part is true. and it matters that it's true. The Milky Way lay across the mountain dark like something poured, like cream in cold water, and the air was sharp with that pine and ozone smell, and the cold came off the ridge in its slow, patient waves, and for approximately 11 minutes, Elias stood on that porch and felt, I think, a kind of happiness that was very close to peace. He noticed the cold first, not the ambient cold of the mountain. He had dressed for that, but a specific cold, a directional cold, the way cold moves off a block of ice toward you when you open a freezer door. It was coming from the tree line. He looked toward the trees. The tree line was perhaps 40 yards from the porch railing. In the starlight, he could see the shapes of the pines, the gaps between them, the silver gray of the ground cover. He could see these things because there was enough light from the sky. But the shadows between the trees were moving, not swaying, not shifting the way shadows shift when a branch moves in wind. These were moving the way a tide moves, slowly, with intention, with the absolute patience of something that has been waiting for a very long time. He watched the shadow at the edge of the tree line thicken. This is the word he used in his journal, and I want you to hold it. Thicken. The way a broth thickens when heat is applied. The darkness between the outermost pines and the open ground of the yard became more concentrated, denser, until it had a visible edge, a clear and defined border between itself and the lesser dark of the open air. And then it began, very slowly, to cross that border. Elias did not run. He told me later, in one of only 3 conversations we had before the county rerouted the access road and effectively erased the ridge from the navigable map. He told me that he did not run because the movement was too slow for running to feel like the right response. Running is a reaction to speed, to threat that comes fast. This came like weather. The darkness crossed the yard in something close to 20 minutes. He stood and watched it the whole time. He told himself it was an optical illusion, a cloud bank, a change in his eyes adapting to the dark. He is an intelligent man, and intelligent people are very skilled at assembling explanations that allow them to remain still when every older, quieter part of them is screaming to move. The shadow reached the base of the porch steps. The temperature on the porch dropped perhaps 15 degrees in the space of 30 seconds. He saw his breath. He had not been able to see his breath before. And then he heard the boards, the porch boards beneath the shadow's leading edge, not beneath his feet, but at the far end of the porch where the rail meets the steps, began to speak, not to crack, not to pop with cold. They groaned, the way wood groans when weight is placed on it, a slow, settling, structural sound, as if something of considerable mass was stepping up. One board, then the next. Elias looked at the porch glass. There was a pane set into the door behind him, and a pair of windows flanking it. And where the shadow's edge had drawn level with the glass, the surface was frosted. Not condensation frost, not the pretty crystalline frost of winter mornings. A flat, opaque white, like the glass had been breathing and forgotten to stop. He went inside. He will tell you he walked calmly. I believe him, in the way I believe most things that people tell me about that night. Not because I think they're lying, but because the body in extremity will sometimes find a terrible, borrowed calm. A stillness that looks like composure, but is actually the mechanism of shock doing its quiet, merciful work. He went inside and he turned on every light he had, every lamp, every overhead, the stove light, the bathroom fluorescent, which hummed at a frequency he normally found irritating, the particular high whine of an old tube ballast, a sound like a distant television tuned to nothing, but which that night he found he wanted very badly to hear. He turned it on and he stood beneath it and let it hum into him. The darkness did not come inside that night. But here is what I need you to understand, and this is the thing that Elias could not have known, that the settlers knew and built their habits around, that Murray and her bone tallow candles understood in her bones and her budget. The darkness of this hollow is not patient the way weather is patient, waiting for a gap, an opening, an opportunity. It is patient the way water in limestone is patient. It is patient the way stain is patient. In the 3 weeks that followed, Elias ran the lights as he should have been running them all along. Every flood, every lamp, every bulb, dusk to dawn without interruption. He called a supply company and had additional floodlights installed in the south wall. He wired them to a timer. He did everything correctly. He paid the full tax, and the darkness did not advance again. But in the morning, every morning without variation, there were places inside the house where the light seemed to fall wrong. Not dark places, not shadows exactly, just places where the light arrived and did not fully land. A corner of the kitchen where the overhead fixture cast its glow, and the glow seemed to stop a few inches short of the baseboard, leaving a margin that was neither shadow nor light, but something between them. A stretch of hallway wall, chest height, where his hand, when he ran it along the plaster, felt a faint and sourceless cold, as if the wall itself were breathing inward. The window glass, the panes that had frosted on that first night, was replaced twice. Each time, within 2 weeks, a faint opacity returned. Not complete, not total, just enough that looking through it felt like looking through gauze, or through water, or through old photographs of rooms that used to be. He had let the dark inside, not far, not deeply, but the hollow's dark. Once it has crossed a threshold, does not retreat entirely. It thins, it spreads, it learns the shape of the rooms it has touched. Murray would have understood this. She would have nodded and reached for more tallow. The interest, she would have said. You let it take its interest. Elias still lives on the ridge. He does not turn the lights off anymore. Not ever. The power bill is what it is. He has made his peace with the cost, the way you make peace with any tax. Not happily, but with the recognition that the alternative is worse. He sleeps with 2 lamps on, both incandescent, the warm kind, the yellow kind, the ones that buzz almost inaudibly if you put your ear close to the shade. He says the sound helps. He says it is the sound of the hollow being held back, and that if he listens carefully, the buzzing is rhythmic, almost like a pulse, and he can let his breathing settle to match it. I believe him. I believe that is exactly what it is. Now, I want you to listen to your own lights for a moment. Whatever lamp you have burning, wherever you are, in your bedroom, in your living room, in whatever gentle space you have made for yourself tonight, listen to the hum of it, the particular frequency of it. That sound is not nothing. That sound is the filament and the current doing the oldest work there is, which is holding the darkness at the margin, keeping it thin and polite and back behind its border. You are paying your tax right now, without knowing it, without thinking about it. The lights are on. The dark is where it belongs. In the morning, Lux-Hollow will be just a name on a county map that most county offices have quietly stopped printing. And Elias will wake up and check every bulb, and the hollow will be where it always is, waiting, quiet, patient, at the edge of the light, where it knows to stay. Sleep well now. The light is on. That's enough.